We are here. So we're here live today with Paoli, and we are going to discuss Freestyle Connection, gymnastics, bodyweight training, calisthenics, breakdancing, and a host of other things. So first of all, I have to say thank you very much, Carl, for agreeing to do this with me. I greatly appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I know that you're a busy dude, but I greatly appreciate what it is that you do on a day-to-day basis, and I'm stoked about being able to talk to you about that.
I'm super excited to be here, and thank you so much. And just to make sure, is the audio okay? Because I believe you're coming through my iPad as we're also live on Zoom.
Yes, so I got the audio. The audio is good, and we are good to go. Okay, so I'll just briefly go over the format of what we're going to do, and then away we go to the races. So I got a bunch of questions here on a number of different topics, and I'm gonna ask you the question. We'll talk a little bit about it, take it where you want, and I'm gonna see what I can learn from you. I'm trying to get inside your mind and understand what makes you work and what I can learn and bring to the people who are my subscribers or the followers or anybody who might be watching this. So the first thing I got to say before we get started though, Carl, can you give us 1 minute about who you are for the people who don't know who you are, if that is even possible? Tell them who you are and just, what it is that you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, in a nutshell, who I am is something I'm trying to figure it out as I go, and it's been a lifetime of work. But currently, the way that people maybe see what I do is as someone who teaches movement, physical movement, but also is dedicated to developing lifestyle. And lifestyle being not just eating, sleeping, and training, but also being able to define one's purpose and grow through basic personal development. And that's who I am, and that's what I do. All
right, giddy up. So that being said, let's get on with the questions, my man. So the first question, so you have a varied background. You've been involved with a number of different things. And one of the things that has played a strong role in your life is gymnastics, okay? So first of all, tell me, how does gymnastics translate into, or how does it integrate with the other aspects of fitness and life for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So gymnastics, specifically for me, was one of the greatest teachers I've had in terms of learning how to take ownership of my own practice, and my own practice being my own life, my studies, my family. And one of the aspects of gymnastics that I appreciated the most was that it was an individual sport, but could only be trained and practiced together. You needed a team of people to be able to accomplish your goals, and you needed to have your fellow gymnasts around you supporting you, and you needed your coaches. But when it came time to actually perform, to step into the floor and to compete at the level that you were hoping to compete, you had to do it alone. It was all on you. And the beauty of that is that that's where the individual expression with a collective awareness comes into play. Because when you are competing individually, you're not just competing for yourself, you're competing for your team, for your coaches, for your country, for your family. And I think that's one of the most beautiful aspects of gymnastics, and I'm so thankful that I got to experience that.
Okay, so tell me when did you first start training in gymnastics?
So I was put into an after-school program in Spain at the age of 6. And that's where I started doing gymnastics. And I realized that it was something that I was really keen to learn more about and to continue going back to. So I became part of the competitive team. And at the age of 8, I was recruited by a local club. And that club ended up taking me to competing nationally and a little bit internationally, and that's when I got into it, and that's how it kind of evolved.
Okay, so we'll come back to gymnastics a little bit later, but now let's talk a little bit about functional fitness. So first of all, what does the term functional fitness mean to you?
Yeah, functional fitness is a term that came into my life around 2007, 2008, specifically when I was studying to become a personal trainer and I found CrossFit. I realized that that was a hot topic, so to speak. And the reason that functional fitness has stuck with me is because I realized that you can't talk about fitness without talking about purpose. You can't talk about development or practice without having an anchor in a goal. And when it comes to functional fitness, what we're really trying to say is that there is no method. There's only a task at hand, and being able to complete the task at hand in an effective, efficient manner is of the essence to be able to perform at the highest level. And performing at the highest level, this is something that I've talked many times about, is that it's being able to not only perform the task, but do it in a way that is in consonance with what you're thinking intellectually, with what you're feeling in your heart, and how you're moving physically. And one of my goals within the fitness scene and talking about functional movement and fitness has been being the translator for people, helping them understand that the body, studying one's own body, is the book, is the solution. And when one can get to know their body, they can get to know how to problem solve and thus be more adaptable and be able to evolve, last longer, feel healthy, be pain-free, without having to go see doctors and nothing against your craft and your practice. But ideally, we wouldn't have to have orthopedic surgery unless we had some major accident or were at an age that maybe there is this natural wear and tear. But of course, we also know that this is a very complex topic because it has to do with how you're eating, how you're thinking, how you're behaving. Lifestyle choices matter, and this is the awareness that I've been trying to talk about and share with people over the years.
It's it's funny because at our gym, at our facility, people often say, "Oh, like why are you doing all this stuff? It's like you're trying to put yourself out of business." And in a way, I am, because I agree. I think that we should be teaching people about all aspects of movement and how it integrates with their life, and it shouldn't be this separate thing. It is your life, right? And it's not just about performing better. It is about longevity. It is about comfort. It is about being able to move when you're 80. It's about all of these things. And I am, in a way, trying to, I love what I do as a surgeon. Don't get me wrong, I love that. But I am, in a way, trying to put myself out of business because when I look at medicine, I look at much of it as being very reactionary. And it's like, oh, you did something. Oh, now you're hurt, and we got to fix that. But I'm always thinking to myself, because I think of myself as a problem solver, and I think, why is it that we're waiting? Why are we catching people? Why are we not teaching them how not to get here in the first place, right? So I like how you describe that, and I also like how you said that you are like a translator, right? I like that, to teach them how to understand their body. Okay, So let's move to calisthenics. Okay. So let me ask about calisthenics first, about in your own life. So what role has calisthenics played in your own athletic development? So we're going to talk about you first, and then we'll talk about in the athletic development setting for general population. So first, let's talk about you.
Yeah, so in terms of calisthenics, one of the things that gymnastics is based off is being able to move your body, and specifically on these different pieces of equipment. And calisthenics, the way that it's seen is as the conditioning elements that one would use as a foundation for having a base of performance to achieve whatever it is that you're trying to achieve in gymnastics. So for me, calisthenics has always been the conditioning part, the base level of performance that one needs to have to express themselves at the highest level. So that's what calisthenics is for me. The other thing is, one of the features that you will see in a gymnastics facility is a set of stall bars. These stall bars, which are usually wooden, is an element and a piece of equipment that in Sweden is very prevalent. And I believe it's actually a Swedish or at least a Scandinavian piece of equipment. And it was used for PE, so physical education. And anytime you see a set of stall bars, what I'm seeing is the most basic piece of equipment that is involved in the development of calisthenics and associated with physical education, and physical education being the base of gymnastics, and that physical education simply being a body weight expression of the whole picture, and that being calisthenics. So that's how calisthenics has kind of served me. Beyond that, what is interesting is that you see now people taking calisthenics and turning it into a modality that even looks like a sport or an art. And I think that's very cool too. And for me, although I haven't done that, I haven't pursued that path, it's very empowering to see that as it translates really nicely into understanding how our bodies work, and once again encouraging people to speak the language of human movement.
Now, so one of the things that I think is quite interesting, so Ido Portal has talked about, athletes, and talked about people with movement skills. And one of the things that he's famous for saying is that, people have no awareness of how to move themselves in space. They have no kinesthetic awareness and ability to know what their body is doing. So why would I teach them a sport or hand them an apparatus without that? And when I hear what you're saying there, I think to myself, in my mind, I look at calisthenics and gymnastics principles as ways of teaching people the foundational skills of how to move yourself in space. And those are the skills upon which you build the rest of the building, right? They're the foundation. So like in terms of athletic development, how do you see the let me back up for a second and say, do you think, the gymnastic skills, calisthenics, calisthenics conditioning, do you think that these things are important for other sports, or do you think that they're just kind of something that is particular to gymnastics and gymnastics competition?
Yeah, I think it's very important. Unfortunately, talking about movement literacy or one's ability to move and to do the basics is kind of like talking about preventative medicine. It's very unsexy. It's a hard sell. People are not interested in it until they get hurt or they can't accomplish something. In other words, when their ego gets involved and it gets bruised, that's when they start to pay attention a little bit. So there's something about presenting people with an artistic, a beautiful, aesthetically appealing expression, such as a sport or a trick, that can catalyze the conversation and then bring them to understanding, appreciating, and living through developing the basics. And I think that's the dissonance that a lot of coaches experience, or is also part of what someone like Ido Portal is talking about. And I'll give you an example. I met Ido Portal in May of 2014 in Berlin. I was giving a talk there, and someone in attendance came up to me later and said, hey, I think it would be really interesting for you to talk to Ido Portal. He's here. I know him, and he would probably want to meet up with you. So I said, sure. And I met up with him. We had a great conversation over lunch. It was very fun. He's a very smart guy, very insightful. And I remember leaving that meeting, and I thought to myself, this feels nice. I don't have to be that guy. In other words, he is such a purist. He has such a focus on the foundation of movement that the culture that he's developing with the movement culture, what he's teaching, the people that he's surrounded by, what he continues to do, it has enough momentum, enough traction that he's moving the needle that way. And what I was celebrating was that diversity in this case was being welcomed, that you could do the trick, the fancy thing, the limited approach to your performance, as long as you were aware that there was this other side of the coin that had to be addressed. And that if you went down the rabbit hole of that sexier, maybe at first, cool kids club practice, that you would arrive here. Mm-hmm. Where Ido is. And I think that's a fantastic thing. And he's done a very good job at marrying both those sides, the aesthetic, the fancy tricks, which is something that he shows a lot, with the conversation around master the basics, which is a never-ending process. You never master, you're only in the process of mastery.
Yes, yes. Well, and it's interesting, you know, you mentioned he's kind of taken this thing and made it a little bit sexy. And you know, when I think about athletes that we've trained in our facility, it's always, everybody wants the usual, bigger, faster, stronger, right? But nobody wants to necessarily move better, and they don't consider that until, as you say, they're hurt or something like that, or they're a little bit older, more advanced in their career, and they go, oh geez, how am I going to stay on the field or on the court for longer? I need to know these things. And so I think it's interesting, and the challenge in our head is always like, how do we get these young guys to know that this stuff not only would keep them more healthier and you know, better able to maintain their longevity, but it would also allow them to move better and perform better and to do more of what they like to do and make it look more pretty, right? Mm-hmm. And it's always a little bit of a challenge trying to get people to get them to understand that.
Yeah. Okay. If I can add to that, I think what I found in my practice as a coach is autonomy is very empowering. And when one has autonomy and we can celebrate one's interest, what ends up happening is that it translates into wanting to know more. Yes. Because it's their choice. And when it becomes their choice, and all of a sudden a conversation unfolds, and it's not now us telling people that it's important that you floss. It just becomes a thing where you want to floss because you know it feels good. It's part of your practice, and I think that's a very special thing. And the other thing is, sometimes we underestimate the youth. We underestimate their abilities and their capacity to understand complex concepts. They're very open. I mean, I've talked to 6-7-year-olds who understand. They actually get it emotionally. So it's our job to be able to articulate it intellectually in a way that makes sense. So yeah, I'm with you 100%, and I think it's possible.
Okay, now let's broaden out our scope a little bit here. And so obviously gymnastics is a heavily influenced for you, but also you're a CrossFit coach, and with CrossFit there are a lot of apparatuses that you use, whether it be barbells, rings, or whatever. So tell me about how do you think for the average person, body weight training, what role do you think that plays as opposed to training with some sort of apparatus, whether that be, you know, barbell or whatever, but just body weight training versus sort of conventional or training with an apparatus?
Yeah, I think this is where the idea of our bodies being a vehicle that we are driving is very important to realize, and that the first thing you do in the morning and the last thing you do in the evening is get out of bed, get into bed. You're not using any equipment. Object manipulation, such as brushing your teeth or carrying your groceries or picking up a barbell or doing some pull-ups or trying to get over a wall, that happens later. So the more aware one becomes of how they move through space independently of manipulating an object or moving an object, the more proficient they become at then applying that ability to picking something up. And then when you put that in context of a function, for example, now we're starting to talk about adaptation, and that's where one gets creative and can now elicit specific adaptations depending on the desired outcome, or moreover, the needed outcome. And that's where most people aren't aware of what they need. But when they start paying attention to how they move, when they just move their bodies, they start to become aware of those things, and they go beyond their desires and into meeting their needs. And I think this is what you were talking about earlier, is that as a doctor and someone who practices medicine, medicine is the teaching of science, and doctoring is the teaching of a doctrine. But what we need, and this is something that is important in academia, is to do more research so we can expand on the doctrine and not allow there to be dogma. And this is the ever revolving door that we need to go through and be willing to go through. And I think that's where body weight exercise plays a role in our overall awareness and consciousness. And I think that's the beauty of it. And then you can apply it to whatever you want. It's once again, it's the basics, but it seems so easy to the able body that we don't pay attention to it until we either get hurt or we start to grow older and we feel aches and pains in places that we hadn't felt before, and we start to feel limited, or in other words, lack the freedom that we think we're worthy of.
Mm-hmm. One of the viewers asked the question, why is everyone obsessed with mobility, like even as a term today? And you know, I'll let you respond to that, but one of the things I think is that I'm not sure that necessarily people are necessarily obsessed with the term, as you said, just more aware. There's things that we weren't aware of previously that people are now starting to become more aware of. But what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. I think what it comes down to is how one markets something or presents something. I mean, this is kind of like Edison versus Tesla back in the day. Maybe Tesla had better ideas that could make a more positive impact in the collective, but Edison was able to politically, economically bring his ideas to market in a way that people found utility in them. Same thing happens with words. You see how if you just look up the origin of a word, you start to notice that there's trends. Oh, in this context, this word started becoming popular because it was needed to convey a message. I think at this time, or especially over the last 10 years, mobility has become synonym with stronger, fitter. And it's simply one's ability to get into a position that allows them to better apply force and thus be able to move. And then if you add on all the other benefits and you sell that, then it becomes well branded, as someone is saying right now. And branding not being a logo or an emblem or something aesthetic, but rather a philosophy. And that's kind of what we're seeing, is that mobility maybe resonates emotionally with people in a certain way because people have done a good job at making it relevant.
For sure. Now, for yourself, okay, well, it's interesting. I had a conversation with Sci Monster last week, and I said and I asked him this same question, but I'm going to ask you, see how you respond. And I said to him, he's a bit of a movement generalist, okay, because he has influences from breakdancing, gymnastics, acrobatics, a whole bunch of things, and you are somewhat similar to that. So why have you had this approach to movement training?
Well, one reason is that my parents put me into gymnastics. I didn't choose. They just said, we think this would be good for you. So I got into it. That's one reason. The other reason is because whatever desires I've had internally have been well reflected in the practice itself. So for example, when I was a kid, I remember being in the gym and seeing a picture of someone doing an iron cross on the rings, and thinking about, wow, what it would be like to do an iron cross like that. And then later I learned that this was someone that competed in the Olympics. And then I learned about the Olympics as the highest level of performance. So I thought, oh, that's where I want to go. My internal bodily desires can be manifested, and they look like that. In other words, it was relatable to me, and that's the reason I got into it, and I've utilized it. In addition to that, as time went on, I've met people who I've been able to talk to that have brought clarity to me, and these are doctors, orthopedic surgeons like yourself, physical therapists, chiropractors, osteopaths, massage therapists, coaches, people from other disciplines that have been able to tell me the same thing that I had experienced in a way that I could understand, in addition to tell me the same thing other experts, so to speak, were telling me, but from a different perspective. And this giving me more awareness, just because I get the different sides of the coin, or of this very complex geometrical shape that is physical skills and development.
Okay. Now somebody asked here, volume versus intensity in gymnastics, and how can someone identify exactly what they need to improve? So yeah, one of the first guys that I spoke to is a guy named Art Schwartzberg, who's the Iron Wolf, and he's a calisthenics guy, but he's a military guy. He's all about volume, right? So 500 burpees, 1,500 push-ups, all of that kind of stuff, as opposed to, and it's not to say that he's not worried about the quality of the movement, but he's more about the volume, and certainly about doing it correctly, but it's less about the aesthetics, whereas somebody who's, has a more gymnastics approach is more about the aesthetics. So how do you find out what's the appropriate balance, and how do you know what you need?
Yeah, I think intention would be the word that I would use at this moment, because depending on what your intent is, you will approach things from an intensity perspective, which is, if so to speak here, would be going hard in a short period of time with a few movements. And volume would be the act of going for long periods of times and doing many movements. But if you look at intensity, you can see doing something that is long lasting or with a high number of repetitions as intense. That's pretty intense. So the intensity of going long is there. So I think intention is where the conversation has to start, and then realizing that volume, the number of repetitions, is extremely important. The question is, are you doing it in a way that is qualitatively applicable to the outcome that you're seeking, whether it's a specific task or being able to adapt to other tasks, or not? And this is the conversation. And if one doesn't try, doesn't experiment, one doesn't know. But this is also why people seek out coaches and look for guidance.
Mm-hmm. Now, to tag on to that, when you look at specific skills within gymnastics, or using a gymnastics approach, do you think that a skill-based approach to fitness training is superior than, say, conventional training, right? In other words, you know, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to do bench press, squats, leg press, whatever today, and I'm going to do my 3 sets of how many ever reps and all that kind of stuff. Or instead, I'm going to go to the gym today and I'm going to work on doing, trying to get my planche. I'm going to work on trying to get my handstand. Do you think that the skill-based approach is superior to conventional training? And if so, why?
Well, once again, I think it comes back to what is it that you are trying to develop and why. And I think skill-based training, so to speak, would simply be an approach to training or one's practice that is intended to create a base of performance that allows for one to adapt into anything they want to achieve. So I think that's important. If your intention is to have like big biceps and to knock out some curls for that reason, then that is superior for you. That is great. Unfortunately, if it doesn't translate into helping you or assisting you in meeting your needs, then we have a problem. Having a six-pack and looking good on Instagram is not necessarily going to translate into you being a better father or manager or coach or doctor. And I think it's important to be able to take a holistic approach to anything that we do and be able to see that. And I think this is where choices come in. And I think there's a need to be a generalist, but within the general practice, have a specialty. In other words, if I choose to practice hand balancing and only hand balancing, I must be able to see that the hand balancing itself, although it is a choice and a specialty, requires an ecosystem, a certain lifestyle around it to support it that will not only make my handstand better, but allow me to live the life at a level that I believe I can live it. And this is difficult, but I believe that by choosing one aspect of development will allow you to see what other aspects need to be incorporated. And I think that is skill-based. It's an intellectual and emotional approach first, and then it is expressed physically, so to speak.
Okay, so if we now talk about a general sense and not any particular discipline,
Mm-hmm.
what skills do you think, in your mind, are most transferable between movement disciplines, part one, and part two? What are the skills that, regardless of your sport, regardless of your activity, give me, say, 5 skills that you think everybody should learn and master for physical literacy?
Yeah. Well, I wrote a book about this and I said that there were 4. Okay. But that was a marketing tactic. as you can imagine. And in the book, I said squatting mechanics through a pistol, so a single leg squat. That's an advanced movement, but it's a progression towards it. I talked about pushing mechanics, which could be expressed in a handstand push-up. I talked about pulling mechanics, which could be expressed in a pull up and into a muscle up on the rings. And I talked about a burpee, which was an example of a combination of pushing and pulling for upper and lower body. And being able to do as many variations as possible of these and exploring those was the way to go. That being said, I think it's through play and playing with the ground. For example, just getting on the ground and standing back up, or climbing, where you can really express yourself physically, at least from a basics perspective, at a pretty high level. And then if you take that and apply it to balance, such as handstands, standing on one leg, or slacklining of some sort, surfing, skateboarding, biking, you can now really start to transcend. And then if you add in some kind of object manipulation, I mean, we see a lot of the people in the movement culture, they like to juggle, which is something that I learned as a kid, actually, in circus school. I learned how to twirl a little stick and juggle. Those are great neuromuscular practices that are low impact and that can allow for the nervous system to be awake, so to speak.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned that I really like, when you talked about the squat and you talked about the pistol, single leg variant, explain to us why I know in my own head why I like it, but tell me, why do you like the single leg variant?
Well, I personally don't like doing it. But the reason I presented it in the book and it was so important was because we are developed for locomotion. It's one of our great assets to be bipedal, meaning we walk on two legs and we can run, and we have a skill set that allows us to move very effectively and very efficiently for long distances. And in a squat progression, when one goes to standing on one leg, we are loading the body off axis, so to speak, and that creates a rotational component. It makes us spin off axis, and we need to now resist that rotation. The resistance of rotation is the strategy at the most fundamental level that we do from our spine into our hips that translates into being able to walk forward. If we couldn't resist rotation, every step we took, we would spin off. So that is a very important aspect of our most basic stability strategies. And that applied to a squat, for example, single leg squatting in this case, can elicit great benefits on the other side. Now, this is the most important aspect of this, is that one doesn't need to be able to perform a pistol, a full pistol, to be fit, but rather be able to perform a variation of the pistol that challenges the ability to resist rotation when unilaterally loaded or loaded off axis, loaded away from the midline. Mm-hmm. It's that simple. And then applying that to hip, knee, ankle mechanics that are translatable into either lifting something or walking upstairs, walking, running, jumping, landing, turning, throwing even. So that's the reason I chose it. And the way that I see it is every movement that we choose is a case study or a map towards a process. And that's where the individual expression and adaptation to a technique is very important. And this is what I was alluding to earlier, that the reason gymnastics affected me so deeply was that it was an individual sport with a collective consciousness in mind.
Okay, cool. All right. So now that I got all those questions out of the way, I'm going to just be a little bit more free flowing. So Freestyle Connection, that's your baby. All right. So tell us about what is the idea behind the Freestyle Connection and how does that apply to the average person?
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Freestyle Connection was the brand or method or language that I was sharing with people, and I talk about in my book, and I've talked about for many years in videos and in my coaching. Freestyle Connection is first and foremost, freestyle is the acceptance, respect, and celebration of all styles, all ways. This is very important to me, is that every single person or way of doing things is welcome. And connection is the essence of being able to connect the dots where needed so one can create their path. And that's what Freestyle Connection is. The second thing I want to say is that Freestyle Connection may look like my baby, but it's a product of me doing the best job I've been able to do and putting in as much effort as possible into trying to answer the questions that we in the fitness community have been asking ourselves, and to do it in a way that's a little bit outside of the box, a little bit outside of the norm. First, for me personally, starting away from gymnastics. What does it look like to break the gymnastic style? What does it look like to break the CrossFit way of doing things? What does it look like to understand where those styles come from and ultimately where they are going? So Freestyle Connection is not mine. It's anybody's. And I've said this a million times. You can take my book, copy it, spin it your way, call it freestyle if you want. It's yours. I didn't invent it. I was just part of the unveiling of it. And I think that's very important. And the way that I use it now is as a way for people to understand, depending on where they're standing and how they're looking at fitness from a physical perspective, on how to navigate it. And it's that simple. It's how can a doctor and an athlete connect and speak a language that makes sense for both of them, and just aligning people. It's that simple, really.
Very cool. Very cool. So now I want you to grab your crystal ball, okay? And we're going to look 5 years down the road, okay? So
Okay.
think about movement culture, where it is today, and what do you think is going to happen over the next 5 years? Where do you see movement culture? Where do you see that going?
Okay, movement culture as presented by Ido Portal.
No, just in a general sense. So, not just what Ido's done, but what you're doing, all types of people are doing, Erwin McCord, all these other, everybody who's in that space. What do you see happening?
Yeah. Well, I think you alluded to this earlier with your practice. It's almost like you're trying to put yourself out of business. But in reality, what you're really doing is you're doing what a doctor is supposed to do, which is to heal. You're a healer. And movement being one of the pillars of healing oneself. So I think what's going to happen, and what is already happening, is that people are starting to feel more empowered to take their bodies into their own hands and exploring developing it themselves. And something that's happened with the pandemic right now is that people have had to make a choice. How can I continue to train, continue to move in a way that makes me feel independent, that doesn't make me feel tied to, for example, here in the US, as you know, we have a massive problem with health insurance and healthcare, and people are scared to lose their health. So out of fear, some people have had to make the choice of building a stronger body, and maybe they couldn't financially afford to have a coach or follow a program, so they've had to do it on their own. And I think that's really where we're going, is we're going to be closer. I don't know, in 5 years, I think it's going to take longer than that, but we're going to be closer to a place where people will see physical education as an essential subject rather than the thing that you kind of have to put in because somebody told me to. I think that's where we're going. And the other thing is that it's becoming very clear that through physical development, we're also tapping into the emotional and mental development. And more than ever, we need this to be at the forefront of the conversation. And I think through the empowerment of conversations like this, we are telling people your body is smarter than we are intellectually. Your body knows more than we do. Use it. That's what it's designed to do. And by using it now, start to experience what it's telling you. Oh, I feel a little pain in the knee. Oh, I don't know why, but what if I moved away from pain? What will I encounter there? Well, maybe I'm encountering a little bit of discomfort, but it's not causing pain. It subsides as soon as I stop moving. I'm sleeping better. I'm getting fitter. Maybe that way of moving is the right way. And that's the one that I should be expressing, and then growing from there. So that's what I think is going to happen. And we've also seen that these 9-to-5 jobs that a lot of people are working, it doesn't require you to sit by the computer for 12 hours a day. You can actually get that job done in half of the time. So I think our work environment is also going to change, and schools are going to change, and that's what I think is going to happen if the leaders in those communities are willing to put the effort and go through the colossal task of changing the culture and systems that currently exist.
You know, I think that's very well said. You know, and I think about the current pandemic, and right now everybody's got this short-sighted focus, and understandably so, right? We have this new virus that can potentially kill you. People think, oh my God, what are these things I got to do? Wash my hands. I have to self-isolate, wear a mask, all of these things. But this is like a short-sighted focus, right? Because eventually, as you said, things will need to change in the future, and we're going to start to understand, oh, well, geez, what are the things that I can do to make myself healthier in the long term, so that I'm less likely to be in that population that is more susceptible to this or to any other virus that might come along, or any other illness or any other problem, right? And so I think that we're going to see more of that. And it's funny, you know, when you look at things in life, they kind of follow the pendulum swings one way and then it swings back the other. And if I think back, you know, if I belie my age here, and I think back to when I was a child in the 70s, and when we had calisthenics and daily phys ed, which was not a separate course. It was just this thing that you did. Everybody, the whole school, everybody did it. And you know, we were healthier for it, right? And then it became this selective, elective, you know, you didn't have to do it. And I think the pendulum, because of the pandemic and other things, is gonna swing the other way. And eventually it's gonna come back to this point where people, oh shit, yeah, you know what? That was a good idea when we were doing that every day. People were healthy, they weren't as heavy, you know, and yeah, we should do that again. So I think you're right. I think it's gonna be quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's cyclical, like you said. Yeah, it goes in cycles.
Yes. Okay. So I'm gonna ask one more fitness related question, and then I'm gonna totally take another direction.
All right, let's go for it.
Because I think you're up for it, and I think it's gonna be interesting. But so the last fitness question is, so if you're talking about somebody who is looking to address like, this is not a specialist, just somebody who wants to be active, somebody who wants to remain in shape, but they want to be able to touch strength, conditioning, flexibility, mobility. Give me some basic recommendations for that person. What should they be doing?
Yeah, well, it depends. If someone hasn't done anything before, I immediately always think about my mother or my father, and they're active, but they're not hardcore into training. But if they need to focus on one thing, I would say explore the ground, explore getting on and off the ground, explore getting over things. When you see the stairs, walk up the stairs. It's that simple. But then within that kind of mundane practice, find something look for something that's a little bit out there. I mean, I think about my dad, and my dad has always said, I would like to tap dance. I'm like, well, start tap dancing, you know? Buy some tap dancing shoes and take a class. Find something that is exciting, whether it's tap dancing or some basic yoga or gymnastics. Find a pose that you would like to get into. Put a little goal in front of you. Don't succumb to it, but leverage it. Let it be the thing that catalyzes your journey. And that's what I would say. And don't listen to people like myself. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just trying to figure it out, right? It's like, I'm not your guy. I'm trying to figure it out as we go. So I think that's the most important part. And that's all I can say. Find something that looks cool, explore what's around you, and play with it. And do it daily. Make yourself accountable, at least for 21 days. See what happens.
Start a new habit. Start a new habit. And I think that's amazing, you know, like to be able, for you to have the humility and say, oh man, I'm still learning. Like, because there are so many people who say, this is the way to do it. I'm the guru. You need to know, right? And for you to be able to say, I'm still learning, I think that's amazing, right? And I also believe, though, that we should always be lifelong learners, right? We should always be looking to learn more, improve our craft, improve our knowledge base. That's what we should be doing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so I think those are very sage words on your part, especially for a guy who says he doesn't know what he's talking about. I think they're very sage words. Okay,
well, thank you.
But now let's change gears here a little bit. And I don't want to be too contentious, but you know, I spoke to you a little bit about this before we started, and you know, I just want to hear what you have to think first, in general, about what do you think about the situation? And we don't have to talk about political affiliation or anything like that, but just in general, the situation that's going on in the United States right now with respect to race, color, and that, and then also you, as I had said before, interracial, but sort of in a different way than myself. What are your thoughts about you and your family existing in the situation that is in the United States right now?
Yeah, it's a complex topic, as you know, and everybody knows. And the truth is, it's not political. This is not. And for those who don't know, who are listening right now or watching this, my wife and I, we became foster parents 7 years ago, and our child happens to be Black, and we're white. So we have an interracial family, and we ended up adopting, and now she's about to turn 22, and it's crazy to think about the journey that we've gone through. And something that I realized when I became a parent to a person of color in the United States was that although I came in with this idea that I was going to take the stance of parenting from a colorblind perspective, I realized that that was going to set up my kid for failure. Because the truth was, when we walked down the street, whether I was holding her or we were interacting at dinners or just being out, there was a look, a very specific look that we got where it was confusing. They didn't really understand the relationship. Yes, I'm pretty young, and she was a teenager, and my wife is also pretty young too. We're under 40. So the age gap is less than 20 years between us. So there was first of a confusing look. And then I started to notice, wait a second, this is not just about age, but it's also about color. And as time continued to go by, I experienced several moments. I remember I got pulled over by the police, and my daughter was sitting next to me in the passenger seat, and she got very nervous. And I said, nothing to worry about. We're just going to talk to the police, and we'll be off. It's no big deal. And I realized that she needed to talk about that moment, that it wasn't that obvious, that it wasn't like that. We also noticed that For example, if we went to a store and we tested this, we ended up doing a little experiment. When we went to a store, if we walked in together, it would be no problem if we were around the store alone. But if we separated, immediately on the megaphone, they would call for security in whatever aisle my daughter was in. And we thought, no, it can't be. It has to be a coincidence. We've tested this multiple times, every single time. So there is a problem, and it needs to be addressed. The beauty is that something is happening right now that is a little bit greater than just a spike. And the spike is now peeled back enough layers that it's encouraging a conversation that's allowing people like myself who thought he was doing the work to really do the work, to really dig in. And that it's there was a part of me, and I admit this, there was a part of me, oh yeah, I've been a parent to a person of color for 7 years. I know a little bit about this. And it's almost like I got a little free pass because of it. No, you don't. You now have to double down. You have to triple down. And you need to understand what is being said. And one of the things that I've noticed is that the language that is being used to share what is happening is not landing. People who come from a place of privilege like myself are not able to see it. It is so, we're so deaf to this that we simply cannot see it. And it's either because we're unwilling to admit that we're part of a systemic problem, or that we see the world different and that we are different. And that must be celebrated. That must be acknowledged. And to not be scared of words like becoming an anti-racist, for example. I had this conversation. How do I work with my kid? Someone was talking to me. How do I work with my kid on becoming an anti-racist? I said, you don't even have to use that vocabulary at the moment. You just have to use the values and the principles. Teach that, model that, and then back into the words. And I think this is where, I mean, maybe you can hear that I'm pretty passionate about this, because it hits close to home, and it's hard to not feel it really close to the heart. And I've heard people say intense things that I didn't know were even possible to say, like, yeah, those people are part of the underbelly, for example. When I've heard words like that, I almost couldn't believe they were true. And then I realized, this is the worst part, I realized that I condone that. I've allowed that to happen. I've been complicit in such behavior. So I'm happy this is happening. I'm changing. The world is changing. And it's going to catalyze a lot of other conversations. What I do fear is that there's a lack of leadership at the moment.
For sure.
There are people who are leading the charge and who are influencing, but we need organized leadership that needs to crystallize. And it simply hasn't happened yet, because I need to be led in this moment. And then I need to lead where I can. So yeah, it's an interesting time. I'm with it. And it's going to be a rocky road, but let's go for it.
Giddy up. Now, hold on 1 second, because I got 20 seconds left here. I'm going to just end the Instagram, and then I'll finish up on Zoom, brother. Hold on 1 second.
Cool. Thank you for having me, guys.